Okay.
All right, my name is Sergeant Jerry Bauzon. I'm with the Austin Police Department Homicide Unit, and I'm here to discuss our latest murder, which is, I believe, murder number 16. So last week, on July 17th, 2015, officers responded to the Grand Mark Hotel in reference to a disturbance. Upon arrival, Austin Travis County EMS personnel responded, and they subsequently transported Stephen Sylvester, who is our victim, to the University Medical Center at Brackenridge Hospital. Unfortunately, later that morning, Sylvester succumbed to his injuries and he was pronounced deceased at 7 o'clock that same morning. We have statements from a roommate of the suspect, and the suspect's name is Brian Michael Canchola. He's a Hispanic male. He was born November 11th, 1994. We have Canchola's roommate who told us that at around 3:30 that morning, Canchola and Sylvester came back from a night on 4th Street. They had been out drinking. The roommate went back to his bedroom at approximately 3:55 that morning, and when he did so, Canchola and Sylvester went into Canchola's bedroom, and he heard the sound of a deadbolt locking. The roommate stated that around 4:13 a.m. he heard a culmination of screaming, shouting, and banging. The roommate said that he walked out of his room and heard Canchola screaming at Sylvester, and he was screaming, "Why would you cheat on me?" The roommate stated that Canchola and Sylvester came out of that bedroom and were physically pushing each other. The roommate said that he had heard Sylvester also yell, "Stop, let go, I'm trying to leave." Then he heard a dog yelp, and he heard Sylvester yelling, "Let the dog go, let the dog go." Obviously, this worried the roommate. He was able to force his way into the bedroom in which they were in. Both Sylvester and the suspect came out, and then the roommate and Canchola started their own physical disturbance. And that was nothing more than just pushing. So the suspect told Sylvester that he needed to gather his belongings, and the roommate was going to drive Sylvester to the hospital to take care of an apparent injury to his head. He observed bleeding. As the roommate was assisting the roommate stated that Canchola then raised from the couch where he was sitting, and he was still upset. Canchola walked towards them, and the witness had to push Canchola out of the way. Canchola then took a step back and punched Sylvester to the left side of his face, which knocked Sylvester to the ground. The roommate said that Canchola then grabbed a heavy drinking glass and threw it at them. The glass broke, and then Canchola grabbed 2 beer bottles and also threw it at them. I don't believe at this time that either of those bottles hit. Oh, I'm sorry, it says here that one broke behind and the other was blocked and broke against the witness's or the roommate's wrist. The roommate took Canchola, put him in his car, and as they were leaving the apartment complex, I'm sorry, not Canchola, the roommate took Sylvester, put him in his car, and as they were leaving the apartment complex, Canchola began chasing after the car, and it appeared to the roommate that Canchola was trying to knock the window out and break the glass. The roommate checked Sylvester into the hospital, into Brackenridge Hospital, but later found out that Sylvester had checked himself out before receiving treatment. At that time, the roommate believed that Sylvester was going back to make amends with Canchola, so he went back to the apartment complex. When he went back to the complex, the door was locked, so he went to a neighbor's and called 911. It's at that same time that Canchola, who is our suspect, called 911 and reported that his boyfriend, who is Stephen Sylvester, was bleeding from the back of his head and was now unconscious. So EMS arrived, they transported him to Brackenridge Hospital again, and he was pronounced deceased. An autopsy was performed on Mr. Sylvester, and the manner of death was determined to be a homicide resulting from the trauma to the head.
The affidavit says the autopsy also shows strangulation. Was he also appeared to be choked as well?
So the autopsy also showed that Sylvester had a broken hyoid, which is a sign of strangulation. Obviously, we don't have anyone saying that he was strangled, but that is consistent with a strangulation.
Do y'all believe his life could have been saved if he would have stayed at Brackenridge? Like, was that head injury that severe, or was it?
It's hard to say that he would have been saved, but his chances would have been more likely to be saved if he would have stayed at the hospital, yes.
But y'all believe his death was from that initial head injury?
That is correct. So the Travis County Medical Examiners ruled the death as a result of the head trauma, yes. And of course, if he would have stayed at the hospital, he would have had medical attention right then and there.
So just to clarify, it was that head trauma. There wasn't any new head trauma from when he came back to the apartment?
Correct. We don't have any belief that there was further assault once he arrived back to the apartment complex.
I'm a little confused also about the door being locked. You made it sound like the door was locked, so Mr. Sylvester went someplace else, but then the roommate, Conchola, still calls 911 because he knows that he has an injury?
Yes, so after the hospital, the roommate goes back to the apartment complex, and the door to, I believe it was the bedroom, was locked again. So it's at that point that the roommate leaves to call 911, and while he's leaving to go call 911, the suspect calls 911 as well. And he tells the police, my boyfriend and I were involved in a fight, he's bleeding, and he's now unconscious.
Was alcohol involved?
So they had been out drinking that night, so alcohol was involved. To what extent, we don't know.
Any other drugs show up in the system? This sounds like it's pretty violent, so we're just curious if there's something.
Sure, so with the toxicity, toxicology is done usually with the when autopsies are performed, but we won't have those results for weeks.
Is that common for a head injury like that to take, a couple hours for someone to succumb to that type of injury?
Sure, obviously there are a lot of things that come into play, the type of injury, the severity of it, what he was assaulted with. So it could be immediate or it could be hours down the road, just depending on how severe the trauma was.
So when he went to the hospital the first time, they didn't think that it was a problem, they released him?
Well, he self-checked himself in, and then he self-checked himself out.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly? Like he wasn't supposed to leave, but he left?
Well, he voluntarily showed up. So I wasn't there. I would imagine that he showed up at the emergency room, signed in, and if there was a wait, he probably didn't want to wait, and he signed himself out.
So he never saw any doctor or anything?
That I do not know.
That was my question.
Do they have any history of domestic violence, either of them?
So I'm not at liberty to discuss their criminal history, but I can say that nothing in Austin.
So the roommate didn't report any history in the past couple months of living with them of any kind of violence between the two?
No, not that I'm aware of.
One more question.
What would you say to somebody who might be in a relationship that has some sort of a domestic violence component to it?
My advice for someone in a relationship, in an abusive relationship, is they don't need to be there. There's help out there for them to seek. I believe that no one's life should be in danger. No one should fear for their safety being involved in a relationship where there is mutual respect and or love between the two.
Did you say your name and spell it for us, please?
Sure, it's Sergeant Jerry Bauzon, Jerry, Bauzon,